Mark here from Mark 2.0. We got a great guest. We are thrilled tonight to have the award-winning writer, Dan Lalonde in Ottawa, Ontario. He's written on TV shows, playwright, media, print, movies, you name it. Dan, welcome to the
Thank
podcast.
you, Dan, for being here.
Thank you, guys. It's a thrill to be here. I got to say, when I first got the notice that you want to be on this show, I was quite stunned. I'm like, wow, really? You guys would like pick a guy like me, But I'm flattered. Thank you.
Oh, we're
You've done a
thrilled.
lot of great stuff. You've done a lot of great stuff. In fact, I was especially impressed by your book, Real Ottawa. What is the movie theater that we loved, right?
Yeah.
I have cherished memories, childhood memories of movie theaters where we stood in 2-hour lines to see Star Wars.
Yep.
Or we saw Grease for $1.
Yep.
And so I would love to hear, why'd you write that book? What are your insights? Please tell us about the book.
Well, let's start with Star Wars. I mean, the book is it started off as a kind of an autobiography, I guess, if you will, in little kind of, blog-like snippets where I would kind of equate my life to things I had seen in the movies, because I had been a lifelong, I call myself a movie juvie, kind of a movie truant. And if you're familiar with François Truffaut's great French film, The 400 Blows, which is about this kid in Paris and, who basically skips school to go to the movies a lot and gets in a lot of trouble. The first 3/4 of that film, you set that in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, and that was my life, starting in about the age of 13 forward, the junior high school years forward. Barely went to school, was mostly cutting class because I was crazy about the movies, had to be there, had to see something as soon as it opened, would hornswoggle teachers and principals with any lie conceivable to get out of things as important as final exams, because there was a new movie opening at exactly the same time that afternoon at the downtown movie house. So it was a lot of that. And one of the stories in the book is about the first time I saw Star Wars. People today, because it's been such a cultural touchstone for so long, don't remember that when it first came out, nobody knew what it was. Absolutely. The first day, at least, absolutely nobody knew what it was. It just looked like some weird, I don't know, cartoony, possibly semi-sci-fi kind of thing. And it had a princess in it. And what is this? Some kind of old-fashioned entertainment? I don't know what this is. Nobody knew what it was.
Good description.
And so I was 15 at the time, and I had to talk my family that summer of 1977 into going to this movie at a drive-in that had just opened called Star Wars. And everybody said, "What is it?" And I could not describe it because I didn't really know. Nobody knew. And the more I hemmed and hawed, they said, "No, we're not doing this. We're not spending the money. We're not. But eventually my mom kind of said, "Well, if it'll make you happy and shut you up, let's do it." So we all piled into the car and we went to this drive-in, and there was, and I'm not kidding when I say literally maybe 15 cars there max. So 15 little cars on this big screen and this movie that's about to happen. And everybody in my family is still bitching. Why are we here? Why do we spend this money? This is stupid. I don't want to see this. Really? Should we really do this for the kid? But and I'm like, oh, God, get me out of this car. I came very close to saying, let's just all go home, forget it. And suddenly, that famous opening shot where the ship, goes overhead. Suddenly, mid-sentence, everybody stopped their bitching and went, and they all looked at the screen. And by the time the first battles broke out and there was all this, there was like this, hey, who's going to get popcorn? I'm not going. I'm not missing this. You go. Man, I'm not leaving. I'm not.
Seriously.
And everybody was hooked from that moment forward. And if you grew up in drive-in culture, you know that one of the big rituals was that when everybody left, if they liked the movie, all the cars would honk their horns. So there'd be a little parade, in this case, of 15 cars going.
We did it in Phoenix. There's a little tiny drive-in that was by my house that I tell stories about to this day, and I miss dearly.
Wow. Yeah, it was great. And just to finish off that Star Wars story, You know, it was the one night in history that nobody knew what it was. The next day, the reviews came out. You couldn't get into that drive-in. You couldn't get into any theaters. Here we are. What is it? 40 years later, we're still talking about it. Everybody on the planet literally knows what it is. But for that one unique little circumstance, that one little block of 2 hours on that day in 1977, nobody knew what it was. And I was a part of that. That was really cool.
That is really cool. At first, I thought you were just saying that no one had really caught on to it, but there was that brief moment where it just hadn't hit yet that you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's actually much cooler. Yeah.
You know, the legendary story when it was first shown, George Lucas showed it to his buddies, which included Brian De Palma and Steven Spielberg, all up and coming filmmakers at the time. And I think their buddy John Milius, the screenwriter, was there too. And they heckled throughout the whole thing, and they razzed them, and they said, "Oh, the Force, what's this thing, the Force? Come on!" And they gave him a hard time throughout the whole thing. And it finished, and they said, "Nah, you know, it's cute, but you know, you should really move on to something more serious." And Spielberg was the only guy who came out of his seat and said, "Guys, this is going to change the industry." And the other guys turned to him and said, "Come on, get out of town. You've lost your mind."
Yeah.
But, you know, shows you why he's Steven Spielberg.
And now they get stopped at the gate, the security gate at Skywalker Ranch, don't they? Oh boy. That
Anyway,
must
the
be
book is
pretty
full of
sweet.
stories like that. I mean, some are definitely a little more earnest, you know, because there's some sad, like anyone's life, sad aspects, happy aspects, aspects in between. But I guess they're about the lessons that you learn coming of age as you go into maturity, because it covers my life in bits and pieces from, as I said, actually from the first movie I ever saw when I was 5, which was Snow White, all the way through to you know, modern day, being a dad with now a fully grown daughter with a disability, and we share movies together. It's a big bonding agent between the two of us. And so it's all these bits and pieces about my life, but all tied into the movies. And I wrote this over the years, just willy-nilly, in no particular order. And then one day, after I had a whack load of them, I guess about 10 years in, I thought, gee, you know, I wonder if I put these things in chronological order, if I don't have something here. And so I put these things all together in a kind of a coherent narrative. And suddenly I went, wow, I think I've got something. And I went to some of the publishers in the big city here in Canada, Toronto, and they were very kindly, and they wrote back and they said, this is really, really good, but you know, we kind of don't know what to do with it. Like a movie-based memoir, no one's ever done this before. It's kind of new. We don't really know what to do with this, but we recognize that this is very good writing, and keep shopping this. You're going to find somebody.
You know,
And
I already
eventually
appreciate
found
it because I'm 53,
Oh.
coming from a time when there was 5 channels, 5 networks, and that was it. There was no cable
That's right.
TV even, and we saw movies on projectors, literally, you know, which probably we'll never see again.
Yeah, you know, drive-ins, projectors. You know, there used to be little film societies in basements of libraries that would go to those frequently. And as you remember, Brian, you couldn't record anything.
Nothing.
So if something you wanted to see was really, really hot and it was on at 2 a.m., you had to stay up till 2 a.m. to watch it.
Yes, indeed.
And God knew when it was going to be back again on those 4 channels. It's inconceivable today, you know, but this was also a time where banks were open Monday to Friday, 9 to 3. No such thing as bank machines. It was a different time.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so I put together all these things, you know, in chronological order, and the Toronto guy said close but no cigar. And then here in Ottawa, there's a guy named Ron Corbett, a longtime respected journalist for the 2 major newspapers, who left that business to very boldly form his own publishing company. Does quite well, specializing in regional topics. And on a whim, I sent it to him, and he sent it back. And just to tie everything into what you and I have been discussing, Brian, the movie culture of the day, he said, there's one missing thing here. And he said, because I'm a regional publisher, this needs to be, you know, more Ottawa centric. So if you can add your own critical history of the local movie theater scene here at that time that you came of age, you got something. And so I wrote these essays about the movie theaters with a bit of research thrown in, put them all together, worried that it wouldn't tie in. It would look like two different books, warring with each other, but it worked beautifully. And then I had the privilege of going through newspaper archives, because you'll remember another convention of those days was they advertised movies in newspapers.
Oh,
You
yeah.
picked up the entertainment sections and there were ads telling you, here's where Indiana Jones is playing at these times, what have you. And I got to find all these vintage, advertisements for when the films were playing in those theaters and add them to the book. And the book came out, and I'm happy to say it's gotten great reviews, and it's still selling great.
That's fantastic. Mark, you want to ask anything?
No,
Before
I
we
was
move
just
on?
gonna interject with people's love for movie theaters. It reminds me, because I used to work as a fly on the wall, doing extra work on a bunch of different TV shows. We're on the #1 show on Warner Brothers lot, and it's The Big Bang Theory. And what it is we're waiting in line. They're doing an Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. They're showing it at the movie theater, and we're waiting in line. It's an all-night call. You're working overnight, and somebody in line was like, "Turn yourself around. You'll be shown in the shot." It was genius. So I turned myself around. Sure enough, they showed me. But just even like shows of today, like The Big Bang Theory, which it's not on anymore, but it was the #1 show, has a deep appreciation for movie theaters.
Yeah, that experience, I mean, still today, even though it competes now with, a billion channels and streaming and YouTube and all that stuff. But back then, none of that stuff existed. So a theater had a monopoly. So when you went, even though there was television, it was an event. It was a big deal. Like on a Friday night, on a Saturday night, you showed up, and these were not megaplexes. Even that hadn't happened yet. The biggest any theater had was maybe 3 cinemas tops, like a really, really big one, a medium-sized one, and then a really tiny little box, where they showed, the artsy niche boutique stuff. And you couldn't wait. So you show up like an hour early because you wanted a good seat. There was like a velvet rope that you lined up behind. There was a teenage usher with bad skin and Coke bottle glasses and a bad, off yellow suit. You'd chat up people in line because you were bored, and maybe you made a friend, maybe you even got lucky romantically, what have you. And then you came in, and the lights went out and the curtains went up, and the goosebumps that you'd get just from the momentum of all of that experience, the sensorial effect of that was really something else. And it's been diluted over the years, and who knows whether or not in the long term, movie theaters will exist at all. But for now, it's still there. We can still enjoy some semblance of that.
That's so great. Not only do I remember that, I remember, literally Star Wars was showing on one screen, one in the whole, because the guy outbid him, and he was smart. Harkins is his name, and he ended up building an empire anyway. I also went to his smaller theater on the weekends, and just for $1 a movie, just spent the day there. So I'm really looking forward to your book now, because you definitely were in that time frame, and I think guys like me are your target audience. It's going to be a great experience.
I touch on it a bit in the book, but in 1980, a buddy of mine and I went to a theater downtown that was very popular called the Capitol Square. It was 3 theaters. And we wanted to see all that jazz. He had seen it with a girlfriend. He said, "You've got to see this movie. It's unbelievable." I'm like, "Okay." Mm-hmm. So we go and we try the door. The door is locked. We're like, "Huh? What? It's 1 o'clock. It's how can a door for a movie theater Saturday afternoon be locked?" We tried to get it. It's locked. And we look up at the marquee, and the marquee says closed due to projectionist strike.
Oh.
And that summer, there was a projectionist strike, and every single movie theater went down for the entire summer. And I was, as a movie nut, absolutely apoplectic. My life lost all sense of purpose.
Wow.
But it was also the summer I had my very first job in theater. I was a singing muskox.
Neat.
Yeah, there's a nature museum here in Ottawa, being the nation's capital, a lot of museums. And there's a nature museum, and they were doing a show devoted to educating preschoolers and other kids about Canadian Arctic animals. And so I was in a musical about musk oxen. But anyway,
And got paid. That was great. Yeah.
the point is, with my paychecks, no projectionist strike in nearby Montreal 2 hours ago. So every Saturday, bright and early, I would take the first bus, 2 hour ride from Ottawa to Montreal, and spend the entire day in Montreal's movie theaters, seeing everything I couldn't get in Ottawa, and then come back very late at night. And I still remember one day that summer where I saw all this in one day, first run, which was The Shining. I think it was The Shining, Caddyshack, Blues Brothers, and The Empire Strikes Back. That was in one day.
Can't
My
get any bigger than
father
that.
actually let us go to the movies and watch. He was a nut like us. He would watch 3-4 movies on Father's Day.
Wow.
And we would just literally go until we had sore eyes. So I'm totally feeling what you guys did. We would totally do that. It was
did you do the art house circuit? You know, you had the big cinemas, and then you had the little artsy fartsy art house play. They played all the Ford films. People forget foreign films were huge in that era. Today, 95% of what you see is American.
Yeah.
Back in those days, it was maybe 50%, and the rest was Italian, and it was Swedish, and it was French, and it was Japanese, and sometimes even things like Polish. And they all played these art houses. Did you ever go to those?
No. It's mostly the big budget things, that my dad wanted to see. And I was right there, man. He would come get me out of school to go see Alien.
Oh,
I
nice.
will never forget that moment when that thing came out of that guy. I was like 6th grade. I was like this huge one big screen, and I was just teleported into another realm.
Wow. I remember the tiger coming out of the jungle during Apocalypse Now.
Oh,
and I think I literally jumped into my buddy's lap. I mean, I must have screamed like a 5-year-old girl.
that was a very intense film. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was a little young to really remember the details of that, but man, that would have been very shocking. Yeah. Especially with, again, we didn't have anything but 5 channels otherwise. And there's nothing like the movies to this day. There's nothing like that experience to me. They haven't really topped it. Yeah, they've made it look good and stuff, but the immersiveness, no, they haven't topped what Star Wars did to me anyway.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like I said, I hope that experience stays with us.
I think your book is going to capture that well.
What's that?
I think your book is going to capture that well. Sorry to talk over you, but you've really got, you really got a handle on how I felt back then.
I've got another book I want to plug coming out, which is actually I just signed the contract today.
Sure.
Please, yes.
Congrats.
Oh, wow, congratulations.
Thank you. It's called Drop Dead Funny, American film comedy of the 1970s.
Wow.
I was born in 62. My prime movie year started about 73, 74. And these are all movies I've seen a billion times. And it occurred to me one day that even though there's a lot written about films of the 70s, everybody writes about the dramas, because all those great filmmakers, Coppola, Scorsese, De Palma, all these guys were coming up at that time, lots to write about. Almost no one's ever written about the comedies aside from Woody Allen and Mel Brooks. And I went, gee, I should write about these things.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of a critical historical look at 130 films, comedies, all released between 1970 and 1979. And it's also kind of a reference book. It kind of goes by year, each film by year. So if you're watching TV one night or you're on a streaming service and you go, oh yeah, this thing with Chevy Chase and Goldie Hawn that came out in the late 70s, I vaguely remember that. You can pick up the book and say, oh, what does Lalande have to say about it? And you can read a page and a half on not just the history, but also my kind of critical spin about it, and talking about the year and the times in which it was made, the sensibility that the film came out of. And that book is going to be coming out in late next spring.
And it focuses solely on comedy.
Solely on comedy.
Yeah.
130 films, like I said, that in that era. And it's an interesting era because it's kind of a, being bi-coastal became a big thing in that era in show business. Having a place in New York and having a place in LA was the coolest thing to have, is those dual identities. And if you look at film comedy at that time, one of the major thematic threads of the book is the fact that at the beginning, it's all about New York. So the first half of the book, New York at that time in the 70s, I mean, we've all seen Taxi Driver, was not a pretty place. Everything is going to hell. Crime is unbelievable. People are regularly being murdered in Central Park. There's labor strikes all the time, garbage in the streets, riots in neighborhoods, arson is going crazy, crooked cops on the take, like, Serpico trying to tell these guys straighten up. And a lot of humor comes out of terrible circumstances. And so a lot of that comedy at that time is all about these, good-hearted, middle-aged Americans who, grew up during the Depression, fought in World War II, built this nice Dick and Jane suburbia in the 50s, and then 60s and 70s watched the whole bloody place go to hell and kind of go, what the hell is happening here? And a lot of that angst comedy comes out of that. And then as time moves on, everyone finds this happy alternative in the second half of the 70s, which is California, this weird, loopy, surreal, happy place full of kind of benign craziness. And then suddenly all the films become kind of, LA centric with a little bit of Steve Martin, the jerk kind of surreality to everything, and kind of a benign anarchy like the Muppets and Animal House. So you can see that there's this big bi-coastal sensibility that runs through everything, which also comes with a shift in audience. As we go from an older middle-aged audience to suddenly, when Star Wars and Animal House comes out, there's this new younger demographic out there called the baby boomers. They're cutting their hair now and they're not, just being shiftless hippies, and they want to do ordinary things like go to the movies. So let's start making stuff for them. And you can see that they start to become, the audience that eventually becomes the audience when the 80s take root. So that's what the book's about.
That's going to be really great. That's going to be funny and just very interesting, I think. Yes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it myself.
Is there anything else you want to do to plug those or get the message out on either one of those things?
Well, certainly the first book, Real Ottawa. And for those of you who are not, Ottawans or Ontarians or Canadians, you're just people who belong to other parts of the world. Don't be so intimidated by the regional angle, the Ottawa angle, because as Brian pointed out, there's a lot there that everybody who grew up in a certain movie culture could relate to. And you can find that book on the Ottawa Press and Publishing.com website.
Okay.
And it's also available. You can order it online, and it's also available I think it just got released in as an ebook. So you can get it that way too. The other one you're gonna have to wait for. It won't be out for a year.
Just made the deal.
Looking forward to it.
All right.
Okay, so I heard you won second place in a short story contest, Breakfast with the Beatles. Please tell me about that.
All right. Well, you guys, because you do your research, you're good at what you do. You know my background. I started off in advertising. From there, made my way into television, starting writing for children's television and family television, and eventually the comedy and drama and feature film. And that was from the ages of 19 until, my 50s, I guess. And, working in film, independent feature film, was kind of the climax of my writing career. And then when that kind of went down, I was like, gee, I still like to write, but I don't have the opportunity to do anything media-based anymore. But, I could still probably write short stories and memoirs and novels, and okay, let's try that. Well, it's an almost completely different form of writing because it's highly descriptive. And so I spent 7 years, putting my head through a wall, effectively learning how to master that form of writing. I mean, I use the word master loosely. No one masters it, but trying my hand at it. And suddenly, inevitably, if you put in the time, the stuff got better. And I started entering in short story contests. I won one here locally. And then my stuff started getting picked up here and there. And there's a relatively recent publication. It's a lot of fun, called the Syncopation Literary Review. And what they do is they publish stories that are music centric. All have the theme of music around it. And I had written a story by coincidence, not specifically for them. I had it in my archives, called Breakfast with the Beatles. And that's because when I was growing up, there was a radio station here that every Sunday morning used to play 4 hours of Beatles music on a show called Breakfast with the Beatles.
Oh
So
yeah.
every Sunday morning when you had breakfast, you could listen to Ringo while you had your Rice Krispies. And eventually, when I started making breakfast for my daughter on Sunday mornings, I started talking about this show, and I said, "Hey, we can make that show now ourselves because anybody, thanks to their iPhone, could make any kind of music." So we started playing Beatles music every Sunday morning. We still do it, and we have a little tradition called Breakfast with the Beatles on Sundays. So it's scrambled eggs and yesterday, which is actually kind of coincidental because if you don't know this, McCartney, when he first wrote the music to the song Yesterday, he didn't have any words or lyrics to it. And he found the only thing that fit was scrambled eggs. So for years, he went around singing scrambled eggs, ba-da-dee-da-da-da, scrambled eggs.
Oh, that's a good fun fact.
Yeah, so Breakfast with the Beatles, made sense.
That is.
Anyway, I reimagined the story of myself. I'm happily married, but I reimagined the story as a single dad. His wife just left him, and so now he's got the responsibility of his little daughter. And they do this Breakfast with the Beatles thing, and while that's going on, he kind of teaches her a major life lesson, rooted in his own dysfunctional relationship with his wife. Something he learned from that he's carrying over to the next generation. So that's what the story's about.
That's great. I would click with you because I'm a single dad, and you know what? I have a kid who's in junior high, likes the Beatles, and his friend, no lie, his favorite group is the Beatles. So yeah, you can say what you want about the Beatles, but it'll never end.
I had a huge fight with a guy in a bar 20 years ago about the Beatles, and a coworker. And we're talking about the Beatles, and there was a younger guy was with us, and he pointed to the younger guy, and he said, by the time this guy is our age, the Beatles will be completely forgotten. And I went bananas. I said, no way. I said, you are insane. And we went on and on and on and on and on. And 20 years after that argument went by, and I read online somewhere that the best-selling download that year was the anniversary reissue of Abbey Road.
Oh, nice.
And I thought, man, wherever that guy is, I'd love to find him and say, look.
You probably can if you try.
Now, what about the Breakfast with the Beatles? Because when I was living in LA for 10 years, every Sunday, I don't know if it was called Breakfast with the Beatles, but on KRS 101, the oldies station, they would always play 4 hours of the Beatles. And I think it was called Breakfast with the Beatles. So was it a local station thing, or was it?
This was a local station. Now, I don't know if that was their ideas. I mean, radio is one of those things where everybody has a machine that says, you play this, and they say, okay, they play it. But I still think there's a little bit of honor among DJs and a little bit of, oh, I heard this on this station, so-and-so, so I'm going to borrow that here for this market. I think some of that still kind of goes on. So maybe that's what happened.
Sure.
That's awesome. So do you want to talk about anything else that you've done lately, what you're working on right now, or anything before we move to something else?
Well, I'm always working on something. I got a couple of things in the offing. Some of them are movie related and some are not. Before we went on air here, I was talking to you guys a bit about my desire to go visit Phoenix because I'm a big baseball fan. I want to get to all 30 stadiums. Been to 20, but the Diamondbacks I have yet to see in their home field. So I want to do that. So being a big baseball fan, I have some baseball related stuff, including a novel I finished called The Closer, about a relief pitcher who has a bad experience, is forced to retire, and then they decide to devote a little league field where he lives to him. He's got to make a speech to these kids. He doesn't know what the heck he's going to say to these kids because he certainly, given how screwy his life was, doesn't see himself as a role model. But various other experiences happen to him before he's to do this speech that allow him, by the time he does the speech, to kind of, finally import a kind of a message. to finally come up with the fortune in the cookie, if you will. I'm still shopping that around. No takers yet, but I'm still shopping that around. And it ends up, I just found out, in fact, by happy coincidence, that the guys who are going to publish my upcoming book on 70s comic cinema also put out baseball novels. Woohoo!
Wow.
Yeah, talk about serendipitous. So I'm going to approach them shortly and see if they'll bite. So these days it's short stories, novels, memoirs, and nonfiction.
And there's such a big fan base for baseball that you should be able to get it published.
You'd think. I mean, that's one of those things, Canada's hockey.
That's right.
So trying to get a baseball book done in Canada, published, forget it. During the 2002 World Series between the Angels and the Giants, my daughter was having a sleepover. I'm like, opening game of the World Series. And my kids, are you kidding me? So I said, you know what? Okay, let the kid have the sleepover. I'll go to a sports bar and I'll watch the game.
There you go.
Now this is Barry Bonds at the height of his fame before steroids. It's a big deal. So I went to, and I'm not exaggerating, literally 5 sports bars in the immediate vicinity of where I live, and nobody would play it. And I said, guys, opening night, World Series, blah, blah, blah. And they said, nope, there's an inconsequential preseason game between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Ottawa Senators hockey teams, and we are not changing the channel.
Wow.
For the one baseball fan in this 20-mile radius.
So you got
that's
your
how
radio
hockey
on.
crazy Canada is. So trying to get a baseball novel going here, it's a tough slug.
And
that's why I'm trying to shop it, south of the border.
You're gonna laugh at this, Dan. Is I was during the strike season, my dad takes me over to Toronto. So we're in Toronto. We're staying downtown at the Holiday Inn Crown Plaza. We go to the Rogers Center back when they had the Hard Rock Cafe. I don't think it's there anymore. Right. My dad goes, "Where in the heck is the baseball diamond?" And they're like, "They're on strike. We got this set up for the Rolling Stones to come in." My dad's like, "What in the heck? What the heck's going on here? Where's the baseball diamond?" He was so ticked.
Oh no! Ouch! That's where my projectionist strike story.
Yeah. Unreal.
So you want to move on to I was interested in your professor time. What was I, like 15 years or something? Well, Algonquin. How do you say that?
Algonquin.
Algonquin. Yeah.
The Algonquins were
a
famous native tribe. We call them native here. I think you guys might still call them Indians, but we call them Native or First Nations.
Yeah.
And what a weird cultural phenomena that is. Let's take your land, let's kill off all you people, but we'll name our colleges after you. Oh, we'll take that deal, Sure, they all said. Anyway, so Algonquin College, it's the community college here in town. And I was a screenwriter at the time. And I got a phone call from a prof there who said, hey, we teach a film and TV production program, but nobody teaches these kids how to write a screenplay worth beans. It's all, here's how you work the camera, here's how you edit, here's a 3-point lighting system, but these kids really should know how to read a script. None of these kids really know how to read a script. Can you come in and teach this?
Nice.
And I was like, I never taught before in my life. And, formal education always I skipped most of that to go to the movies. But I decided I would try it. And my first class, they gave me a Monday morning at 8 a.m. Oh boy. And these kids were like, didn't want to be there. There was a raging snowstorm as well. So getting there was tough. Most of them looked badly hungover, very sleep deprived. And I'm like, hi, I'm Dan and I'm the prof. And for the first 45 minutes, I could get nothing out of these kids. And then I just casually mentioned some of my early TV credits. I said, and I used to write on You Can't Do That on Television and an animation series called The Raccoons. And suddenly the whole place came to its feet. And these kids went, no way! Oh my God, I grew up on that show. And boom, I had them from that moment forward. And after that, teaching was a breeze.
Oh,
What kind of a professor were you? Like a rather chill professor? I take it you weren't like Sam Kinison in Back to School.
Oh, that would have been fun.
Oh
No,
yeah.
no, what you see with me is kind of what you get, kind of the same way that you guys and I are relating right now. It was
kind
the
of Jack Black
same
without the
rapport.
guitar.
There we go.
It was the same rapport with these kids. And I said to him, look, I said, I run this classroom on mutual respect. So, I'll be good to you guys, you be good to me, and let's have that contract. And they were great with that. The only trouble I ever had in 15 years was there was one guy who pulled out a cell phone and had a conversation right while I was lecturing, a fairly loud conversation. And I stopped the classroom dead and I said, you've got to go have this conversation outside. And he waved me off like, yeah, yeah, and he kept talking.
Oh,
And I
goodness.
tapped him on the shoulder and I said, out now. And the guy left. He slammed the door. He was so angry, he slammed the door. And I finished the class. And at the end of the class, the guy came back in very humbly. And he said to me, hey, Dan, I'm really sorry about what happened. But, you got to realize, man, I'm a Sagittarius and you have to let us have our anger.
Oh my goodness.
Oh man.
So he was my first F.
Oh
Wow.
boy. That is amazing.
Yeah.
What about early
So-
on in your career? Like you can't do it on television. How did you
Yeah.
get that?
That's exactly what I
That's
was going to
a
ask.
huge following because of Nickelodeon in the US. In Canada, it was-
Yeah, which totally sideswiped us because it started off, you probably don't know this, but it started off as a local show right here in Ottawa,
I
Canada.
did see that online.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was live. It was a live local show. They would even do remotes where they'd say, "Hey, next week we're going to be at the, downtown at this place. If you want to be on TV, show up and be in the audience, and maybe we'll put you on air." And actually, it's the first time I ever appeared on TV. I was like, "Wow!" Long before I wrote for it, I went down with a buddy to whatever location they were at, and they said, "Hey, we're collecting jokes off kids. Anybody got a joke?" And I said, I got one. And they put me on camera and I told a little joke and I was on You Can't Do That on television in its very, very early incarnation, maybe first season.
Wow.
I still remember the joke. It's not very good, I'll warn you. But the joke goes, two cannibals are talking and one says to the other, man, I really hate my mother-in-law. And the other one says, well, skip her and go straight to the salad.
It's actually really good.
Nice.
Yeah, I was 15 years old. That was my joke. Anyway,
Sure.
That's pretty darn good, really.
so not because of that joke, but because I was writing for an advertising agency. I was in college at the time, studying film studies, of course. But even then, kind of, spending more time outside the classroom, going to what was playing in theaters downtown, as opposed to what the prof was trying to show us at the class. And I was doing stand-up at the same time at folk clubs. Ottawa had a very, very healthy folk scene, and all the big Canadian folk icons, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, they all regularly appeared here. It was a big venue for them before they became megastars. And long after that scene disappeared, the club still kind of hung around. The folkies, who did make it, still hung around. And I would go up between the folk acts and I would do stand. I was like 19. And one night a guy came to see me who was a college dropout, and he had dropped out to start a small company that wrote funny radio commercials. They're all local, and these commercials were extremely popular. Like everybody, everybody in high school, for example, would do at that time. You could recite Monty Python, you could recite Cheech and Chong, and you could recite these commercials.
Sure.
And afterwards, a guy came up to me and said, hey, I'm the guy who does these commercials. And I went, man, are you kidding? Wow. And he said, you're a clever guy. You want to come write commercials with us? And I'm like, yeah. So I drank their Kool-Aid effectively, forgot about school, and went and wrote these funny radio commercials. And we were just a small little outfit in downtown Ottawa. There were 3 of us. And we kept winning these Clio awards, these international advertising awards.
Awesome.
For doing these awards. Yeah, these commercials. And a local magazine came by and wrote an article about these 3 guys kicking butt in the local advertising milieu. And as a result of that, TV producers started knocking on our door. And the first guys who came by were guys who in the west end of town were producing this kids show called You Can't Do That on Television. And I said, I know that show. I was on it. And they said, okay, well, come have a meeting with us and you know, we'll talk about you guys being staff writers on the show. That's how we got that gig.
Awesome.
That's unreal. And growing up, there's a lot of you know, people remember more the local commercials than the national, in my opinion. Like I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan. We had this Grand Rapids singing telegram. And the guy's dressed like Captain Kangaroo. And he goes on the screen and he goes, hello, my little chickadees. And he's like, call us today, Grand Rapids singing telegram. It's just
Oh, that's great. That's great.
There's
We
so
had a
much
local guy, a
memories with
car
commercials.
salesman. We had a car salesman, very popular, and he was a guy who, you know, I'll sell you this and that. And if that's not good enough, and it was a really bad jump cut, and then it was just his hairy chest, I'll give you the shirt off my back, you know.
Now, does that tie into House of Luck?
Well, House of Luck is way down the line. So
But
just
I mean, the car salesman.
Oh, I see.
Because
Oh,
you
of
were a
course, I
writer,
didn't
you
make
know what
the
I'm
tie-in.
talking about.
Oh,
Yeah.
look at that. How did I miss that? How did I miss that? Ground ball through my legs. Yes. House of Luck. That's right. I was a shirtless car salesman, and you're absolutely right. It was actually a parody of that dude.
Was it? Wow.
I'm about half that guy's size, or maybe a third, but anyway.
Uh,
Yeah, we'll get back to House of Luck, that feature film that I wrote and was in. But yeah, so we started doing You Can't Do That. And recently I read online somewhere, because that show still has, you know, big fans. Someone said this is one of the best written shows about the anxiety of being a preteen.
mm.
And I felt like writing to that guy and saying, you know, the truth of the matter is we wrote most of that show about out of dusty old 1940s and 50s joke books that we would pick up at Salvation Army stores.
Mm.
Because you might remember that the shows were all themed. So they'd say, okay, guys, this week the show is all going to be about frustration. So find out all these things that frustrate kids and people and make sure all the gags are about frustration. Okay. So we'd come up with a few and then we'd be stuck. So we'd say, well, let's go find some, you know, pre-internet, some dusty old joke books and see what we can come up with. Because you couldn't make it too hip and you couldn't make it too edgy because it was written for, you know, a young family friendly 12 to 14, 15-year-old audience. So we had to kind of, as far as we were concerned, we had to kind of write down a little bit. We didn't quite know how to do it. And they would teach us how to pad out the jokes.
Mm.
So you'd have a setup. Hey, so-and-so, yeah? You're busy? No. What is it? I got something to tell you. What is it? Blah, blah, blah. Will you get to the point? Okay. Why does I don't know. Why, what, you know, so you could take a 2-second joke and make it last 2 minutes. But it was fun to do. We had fun doing it. And there was the supervising producer was a guy named Jeff Darby, and we loved cracking him up because when he saw something that he liked, he would jump up and down like a little kid, and he'd say, "Funny, funny joke, funny." And we're like, "Hey, who's gonna make Jeff?" You'd write something and go, "Oh man, this is gonna make Jeff go up like Jiffy Pop, like this." Yeah, or this is you're gonna get a fun E on this, you know, and you would. And I was just talking to him recently. I haven't talked to him in maybe 40 years. We reconnected through social media. After he produced that show, he was the guy who sold it to Nickelodeon.
Mm.
He eventually became the head of Nickelodeon. From there, he became the head of a network called CBS Eye on People. From there, he became the head of Oprah Winfrey's empire. And from there, he became the head of Martha Stewart's empire.
Wow.
Not a bad
Very
career.
impressive.
Not a bad
That
career
is
arc.
amazing. Whoa.
Now,
Yeah, now he's retired, living in outside of New York somewhere and counting his money.
It's like, I love how this information from the 1940s still plays to this day.
sure.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
True, true. And we had no idea what we were doing. To us, it was just we couldn't believe how much money we were making. I mean, you know, writers, you're the low guy on the totem pole money wise, and the residuals weren't very much, but still, like we had day jobs, so this was just gravy for
You were
writing
smart
jokes.
to tap a source like that. Very clever.
Yeah, so we were like, oh wow, great, you know, and we had no idea. You know, Nickelodeon was just starting. No one knew what it was. Here came this show from Canada that they picked up cheap. You know, had anybody said, "Did you know this was going to be the biggest thing, you know, going?" I would have said no. And decades later, I go into a convenience store and there's a copy of Rolling Stone magazine. And the issue is the 50 greatest sketch comedy shows of all time. And I'm like, oh, start going through it. And there's SNL and
Whoa.
there's the old Sid Caesar, Your Show of Shows. And there's You Can't Do That on Television.
Well.
A show I wrote with two of the guys out of dusty old joke books, you know. And then I was in Minneapolis, and I go to the Mall of America in Bloomington, and Nickelodeon has this giant amusement park, right in the middle of this mall, and a lot of it is You Can't Do That on Television themed, the green slime and the whole bit.
Hmm.
And I'm standing here watching all of that stuff, going, some of this,
I would
came
be
out of
so
my-
proud
out
of
my
that. You
brain.
should be. Wow.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, what about it streaming? Is it streaming in Canada? Because I don't know if you know, but here it's streaming on Paramount Plus, and they only have a few seasons. Right before you started writing, they cut it off.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You
Well, that's
didn't
good
know.
because
That's
I
cool.
might be getting some residual.
That's
check.
why they did it. They didn't want to be getting any residuals.
Yeah, you might want to check on that.
Oh, man.
There's an organization here in Canada. It's an arm of the Writers Guild that actually, scours the internet all day long, looking for anybody who might get screwed and owed some money, and then they go after them.
Hmm.
A couple of years ago, they called me up out of the blue and they said, "Hey, we got $5,000 for you." I said, "What do you mean you got $5,000 for me?" They said, "Yeah, we hunted down a whole bunch of things." I was like, "Who are you people, and what is this? Is this a scam? Is this a put
Right.
up?"
Sure.
But here were residuals from all this stuff that I'd written, and that so hopefully I'll put them on this case. The streaming networks here have just been hit with Canadian content quotas, because in
Oh, that's
Canada we're
right.
so
I've heard about
subsumed with
that.
American product that we're like, hey, what about the homegrown stuff? So we put rules up on everything saying 10% of it has to be Canadian, 20% of it has to be Canadian, whatever. So no doubt they're gonna find that. Another show I wrote was a very popular animated series called The Raccoons.
Hmm.
Huge in Canada, like really big all through the 80s. It was like a Sunday night family ritual for every young Canadian family for that entire decade. And the streaming networks now, with this CanCon regulation, just went to the producer's door, beat it down, and said, "What do you want for those shows? We'll take them." And they're just cleaning them up now. I just saw season 1 redigitized, and man, it looks fantastic. And that's just about to go out there. So I know there's dough coming in from that too. So, between You Can't Do That and the Raccoons, I'm enjoying a bit of a renaissance.
We're in the wrong business, Brian.
No, this will happen to us in 40
Yeah.
years as well. So we've been talking about 40 years ago. So overall, this new complete global computer control thing, it's treating you well, it seems then? You like social media and all
Yes.
that? Yeah.
Well, the echo effect, like anybody out there writing for, media in any way, shape, or form, you're going to find that one of the great benefits of it is the technology is ever evolving.
Hmm.
But nostalgia for things people grew up on never goes away either. So those two things, will combine as time goes on, and you'll get rediscovered in some semblance. Things just keep moving on.
Now, what
You
about
were
your
young-
acting?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
What about your acting? Did you take any acting classes, or did that just happen?
Acting, well, I've done stand up, and
That's right. You did mention that.
yeah, and then while we were writing You Can't Do That and the Raccoons, because it was the same bunch of guys, we decided that we were going to enter an improv league, because our big aspiration was to get out of advertising and write more television and comedy and that kind of thing. And there were competing theater troupes doing improv in a competitive way here in town at the time. And we put together a little team. We were terrified because we were writers, like, what do you mean off the top of my head? That's just a stepping stone to get to the good stuff. Why should I show the audience the crappy stuff, the process? So we were terrified. But much to our surprise, we were really good. We were really good at it. And eventually we even took over the whole league. We took over management of the league. And by the second year we were doing it, And it was a midnight thing. Was it Friday nights? Friday nights and midnight at a certain theater here in town. We did it from midnight till 1:30 in the morning. And there would be people lined up in a snowstorm to come and watch us do our thing and compete with these other troops. And we met up with another troupe at that time. They were pretty good. They'd been around a long, long time. They'd done it all through high school. They'd gone to New York City, played a couple of clubs there. And we said, hey, how about we pool our resources together, use some of the advertising company money to find a club somewhere, start a troupe with our own club. So that's what we did. And we started off on Bank Street, one of the main arteries here in Ottawa. Very, very, very small club on a second floor as a walk-up, not much of a marquee. The landlord was a very strict Seventh-day Adventist, so you couldn't sell liquor. Kind of a problem in a comedy club, you know. Here we are selling soda pop and even the snacks, like they had to, there was some sort of religious dietary rule to everything that we kind of baked and sold. So we had these brownies that tasted like, you know, mud, and we had this soda pop instead of beer. And oh God, anyway.
Oh, yeah,
Well, we
used
had
to
a
do
great
these
gimmick
under
for opening
21
weekend.
concerts. Go on, please.
We had a great gimmick for opening weekend. We said we're going to do 48 hours of continuous nonstop improv. And the radio stations and the newspapers all fell in love with that. And it gave us a real big bang going, you know, out of the gate. And we did it. We actually did 48 straight hours, no sleep. I was one of 3 guys who did the whole thing with no sleep whatsoever. We went, and it was cool. Some of the routines we would do, I remember doing on a Saturday morning at 6 a.m. for 3 people. And it really went over. And I said, well, let's try it tonight with you know, real crowds. And that night, you know, 200 people would come in, and it would go like great. And you'd go, oh, wow, we tested that this morning with 3 and it worked on 200. You know, we knew we had something that really worked when, you know, it clicked with all audiences, regardless of size or demographic. And we were able eventually in 6 months to move to a bigger club on Elgin Street, which is the big cultural street. And we did shows. Oh man, we did shows Wednesday to Saturday, including a live radio show every Thursday night. And we did 2 shows on Friday and 2 shows on Saturday, mix of sketch and improv. And after each of the shows, we would do another hour or 2 of spontaneous improv. We're doing that while we're writing advertising, while we're writing You Can't Do That, while we're writing The Raccoons. And it's the 80s. There's lots of money. It's the nation's capital, lots of hotels, lots of convention centers, lots of conventions going on. We would also be playing conventions. So there would be a night or a day where you would write all day, and then you would go and have a little rehearsal, and then you would do a show for a crowd. And while one crowd was coming in and they were seating the next crowd in, you would go down the street to a hotel. You would do something very quickly for 300 insurance agents having a convention. And then you'd get back to the club to do the second show and the 2 hours of improv.
Wow.
Yeah. And we did that for 10, we kept that up for 10 years. We did that for 10 years.
Well, what kind of content would you describe? I mean, how can you give us something? Like, how did it go?
Well, it was a mix of sketch comedy and improv. Most of the sketch comedy was rooted in civic life here in the city, which was, you know, we were all Ottawa boys, born and bred. We knew the scene, we knew the landmarks, we knew what people were fed up with, we knew the personalities, you know, we knew the place inside out. And you know, Ottawa being the nation's capital, it's the seat of politics. You know, everyone's expectation is that, oh, it's going to be about, you know, politics. It'll be a political review. Well, when you grow up in that milieu, one of 2 things happen. You either buy in totally and you're a total political animal, or 2, it's the last thing you want to be associated with. It's surrounded you all your life and you're sick of it. And we were from camp number 2. And 75% of the city, mostly civil servants, felt the same way. At the end of the day, it was the last thing they wanted to hear about. But they had never had other aspects of their life validated. So to go to a club and to have somebody make fun of the bus company, make fun of the garbage pickup, make fun of, you know, everyday quotidian life was like, wow. I mean, they ate it up with a spoon. And also, they'd never been an improv troupe before, so they'd never seen improv before. So people being able to riff spontaneously was this whole new novel thing to these guys as if it came down from another planet.
Hmm.
So it was a great 1-2 punch.
That's awesome. We had someone on recently who's passionate about the USO. Who was that, Mark?
That was Aretha Franklin, Teddy Richards,
Yeah.
Aretha Franklin's son.
Yeah. Just awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I just lost my train of thought. What else? Oh, what else did we want to talk about? You know what I missed? You know what I missed is what I wanted to do early on was talk about your childhood and your parents a little bit, you know.
Let's get into that.
You had a really cool, what's really impressing me is you're a hard worker and you're very funny and you kind of approach things with, you know, integrity and humor and a light heart, you know. So were your parents kind of like that, or?
Yes and no. You know, being a Gemini, that's my most common answer to everything. Yes and no. The yes part is they were very playful. They were very playful people. If you could get them to kind of get loose, it's still true in my family. We're not particularly tight, but when we do get together, everyone's kind of loose and childish, and you know, kind of giggly, and there's that kind of sensibility. A love of play was a very big value in the home. I had no idea that this would, you know, eventually kind of lead to a career, but that was always a major value. So that's the yes part. The no part is my family. My parents were painfully shy, painfully shy. My dad was a very, very shy, humble guy. My mom, you know, I mean, I dropped out of school to kind of become the woman of the house because her mom had left her home when she was when she was young, rather tragically. And so she had to drop out of school to kind of, you know, be the woman of the house as things were in those years. So she was very, very self-conscious about the fact that she wasn't an educated person. So, I mean,
My mom was the same way.
oh my God, so people terrified her. People absolutely terrified her.
Mhm.
And between the two of them, I don't even really remember them talking to each other very much. They really didn't. They loved each other for sure, but they and you know, you'd see a little bit of public display of affection, so you knew things were good on the whole. But oh my God, they were complete scaredy cats when it came to the wider world. And my sister and I absorbed a lot of that osmotically. And you know, here I am, a very verbal person, but let me tell you, man, that didn't happen till years later, because growing up, I was this, you know, shy, terrified person. My parents had taught me that, you know, there's something in the world unnameable that's scary, and it's not for us.
Mhm.
Don't interact with it too much. So we
Interesting.
largely
Yeah.
left the world alone.
And
I
at
know
what age
people
did
like
you
that to this
realize
day.
that you wanted to be a writer?
That's a very good question. Again, going back to that love of play, you know, I remember seeing comedians on television, and they kind of struck me as overgrown children, and I was really taken by that. And I was like, you mean you could grow up and still do this? Like the world will still permit you to kind of play? And not only that, but people will applaud, and they'll give you awards, and they'll give you job. Wow, you know, this blew me away. And the other part of it was, you know, the Marx Brothers were very big in those years. There was a tremendous amount of affinity and nostalgia for them, because there was a lot of kind of anarchy in the world, it being the 70s. And these guys were, you know, filmdom's original anti-establishmentarians. You know, Three Stooges came, same kind of idea. They would walk into a kind of stuffy scenario, and they would insult people, and they would act up, and they would, you know, chase the women, and in this Three Stooges cases, they would, you know, literally rip the place apart. And I was like, it never occurred to me that that was a movie and not real life. I was like, that's what I want to do. I want, I want to go out there into this world that my parents have taught me is kind of scary. And I want to say, I'm not scared of you, because I can control you by coming in and making these little comments and making you laugh. So that's,
That's
you
great.
know, where a lot of that came from.
What about House of Luck? Let's get into that now. And some of
Going
your
back to
other
the
films.
acting. Well, we did all the comedy troupe stuff, and we parlayed that into some comedy TV series that played here locally that were very popular. Again, all rooted in local humor. And as well, we were doing animation was booming out of Montreal. So we were writing a lot of animation that made it all over the world, but that came out of there. And we were writing some light entertainment documentaries that were playing here and there. And then some specialty networks in Canada popped up and we were doing stuff for them. So we were busy television writers. We were able to leave advertising entirely and become full-time TV writers in a place with very little entertainment, infrastructure. You can't do that. That was big. The Raccoons was big. And if you remember The Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin, that was a Hollywood Ottawa co-production. That's not a very common coupling. That came through here and we all contributed to that. In fact, recently, there's a guy, Billy Tooma is his name, Tooma. He's a prof at a college somewhere in the East, I forget where, and he's just put together a 4-hour documentary on the history of the adventures of Teddy Ruxpin. And he got me to talk about the writing of that show. Anyway.
Wow. A 4-hour documentary. Wow.
Yeah, I know. All done it completely at his own expense. And he releases them on YouTube. It's pretty amazing.
Wow.
Now, was that a Saturday morning cartoon in the US or?
Yeah, I was really big. Yeah, I was big in the US.
Toy, right?
I know. Yeah, it was.
Toy. Yeah, and the toys were big.
Yeah.
In fact, the toys now, I think on eBay, the original toys are worth like a small fortune.
Oh,
they are.
I know. Yeah. I wish I'd kept some, man. I wish I'd kept some.
Live and learn.
I think I was given a few when as a writer when I was a writer on it. Anyway, so so we were busy TV writers, and then you might remember in the 90s the independent film boom came along.
Yeah.
So the technology gets homogenized. You can tell I'm a writer. Homogenized such that anybody can make a movie now. Remember reading that Francis Coppola in the late 80s, an interview where he said the next great filmmaker is going to be a housewife in Milwaukee. And what he meant was that suddenly anybody is going to be able to make a movie. You don't need all that big Hollywood infrastructure to make something respectable that's going to get released worldwide. And he was right, because along came Blair Witch Project.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Along came El Mariachi. Along came Hollywood Shuffle. Along came Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And along came these places like Sundance, these festivals that said, hey, what do people make it on the margins here? That's the stuff we want. We can get that released the same way you'd release Star Wars. So it became kind of the new gold mining. Everybody and his brother, instead of a shovel and a mule, had a camera and a script, and off they went. And we were no exception. And Ottawa is the seat of government, but it's also the seat of Canada's high-tech scene, which at that time was absolutely booming. And there were a lot of high-tech millionaires sitting on their shares, bored, looking for something to invest in that was sexy and fun. And we went to a bunch of these guys and we said, hey, how about investing in independent feature films? You might get picked up at a festival. This might happen, that might happen. And they all went, Hollywood, wow. And didn't give us scads of money, but certainly gave us enough to make respectable product.
Smart.
Yeah. And so the first thing we did was a mob comedy. They were popular at the time. A very, very funny movie. If you get ever chance to see it, I don't know where it turns up. I've never seen it, but keep beating the bushes, folks. It's worth it. It's called Two's a Mob, kind of a play on Three's a Crowd. And it's about me and another guy, and we're two brothers who end up, spiraling from petty crime into this big kind of comic crime syndicate. And all shot here locally, supposedly set in New York City. Not a great fake, I gotta say. But there's a billion gags in it. And it's very, very funny. Me and a guy, Rick Kalbar, is my writing partner at that time, my primary partner. Excuse me. We had offices above a Blockbuster. And we just went down to the Blockbuster, rented every mob movie we could find, brought it up to the office, and spent 3 days riffing and wisecracking Mystery Science 3000 style on everything we saw. And I wrote down all the jokes. And I said, okay, now I'm just going to string them together on a plot, and we're going to have a script. And we ended up with this scattergun mob comedy that everybody loved. And we had filmmaking chops from doing industrial films and educational films, which we did occasionally for the government So we had filmmaking chops. And when we showed it to Paramount, Paramount said, nice production values. What did this cost? About $5 million American? And we didn't have the temerity to tell them that it was shot for $150,000 Canadian, which was worth 65 cents on the dollar at that time.
You said
how
you
good it
should have
looked.
said, yeah, but I can do it for 4.
And we want a 3-picture deal. Anyway, what happened to it rather tragically is that because it was a parody of, The Godfather, parody of Goodfellas, parody of all that stuff, we couldn't get E&O insurance on it. So for a film to be released, you need something called errors and omissions insurance so that nobody can sue you. And nobody would give us the insurance. And we said, why not? And they said, because you're parodying other films. What if the makers of those other films decide to sue you? And we said, guys, you've never heard of the Constitution that protects your right to parody? Like every comedian in the world can parody because of that clause.
I believe other films have done that. I'm pretty sure.
That's exactly right. But all these lawyers were too nervous, and they said, nope, not doing it, not going to take that chance, forget it. So as a result, it's had very limited distribution, but it's worth finding. It's a little cult classic.
It's got to be good if they guessed your budget at $5 million.
Exactly. And there was
well done, sir.
Some funny stuff in it. We had a sequence set in the 1970s, for example, and we had the 1970s streaker assassin.
Oh, streaker.
So we had a guy, run down the street totally naked and take out.
There's a thing I haven't heard of in a very long time. There used to be songs written about these people.
Yeah. And my poor buddy Rick, who had the cameo as that character, we couldn't show certain body parts on camera. But he had to be naked. So we covered up his privates with gaffer tape.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And I could still see him screaming after, it was removed by the makeup lady. Don't think that hair's grown back.
Oh my goodness.
So anyway, so we made this film. It looked very respectable. The story about, if I may, about procuring the money for that was, we thought, well, where are we going to find this money? We got to find this high-tech millionaire to bankroll this thing. Which one? Who do we go to? And we had a lawyer who was a very, very devout, born-again Christian. And he said, I got the guy. We'll have lunch with him. Okay. So we have a lunch with this guy who sold satellite time. Networks would buy time on his satellite, and he'd beam what they had out, their product out.
Wow.
And he had a huge sale with a pornographic network. And the pornographic network was about to go out of business, and the guy was going to lose the satellite sale. So he said, you know what? Rather than lose the sale, I'm going to buy this pornographic network. Well, you can imagine in a town like Ottawa, which is a button-down civil servant town, this would be absolutely scandalous. So he ran this in a very clandestine fashion. But he couldn't find anybody to do commercials. So he on-air promos coming up at 8:00. It's, Naughty Nuns or whatever. And he couldn't find anybody who would make these ads. So the born-again Christian lawyer who represented this guy said, a compromise, you make this guy's commercials, he gives you money for your movie.
What a trade-off.
Boy.
The guy said, I'm in, I'll do it. I believe in these guys. They're clever. They're funny. Let's do it. We went, I don't know. So we each went to our wives and girlfriends and said, what do you think? And give them credit. While they were all staunch feminists, they all said, look, man, Ottawa, Canada, not exactly Hollywood. How many people are going to walk in the door with a big wad of cash to make a movie? You guys have to do this. Do it. So thank you to the wives and girlfriends.
Yeah, business is business.
Yeah, exactly right. They knew it before we did. So we said, okay. And then we went back to, the porn guy, and we said, here's the deal. We'll do it on the following conditions. One, totally under wraps, in the dark. Nobody knows this is going on. He's like, fine. And two, we can tease people, but we're not going to show any actual pornography in the promos, because we don't want that footage, on our drives. And he said, okay, you got a deal. So we made this guy's commercials, and, we made our movie. But there was a local tabloid that got a wind of the fact that this guy had given us money. and they wrote a 2-page spread saying,
Whoa.
here are these guys in this advertising company and TV writers who just took money from a porno king to make a movie. You draw your own conclusions.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So our name was Mud, Rumor. You walk down the streets, there'd be whispers about you, the whole bit. I went to a party once where these people confronted me and said, how could you?
Oh,
And I,
goodness.
no matter how I tried to explain to these guys, we're making this innocent mob comedy, nobody would buy it. And then finally, when the film came out, we invited all these people to the premiere. They laughed all through it, and they left offering no apologies whatsoever.
Well, at least you got her done anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
It was a
That's
rocky
right.
road. Oh well.
Yeah. Anyway, everybody loved the movie. And so we used it as a demo. We went to another guy, and a more respectable guy, and we said, here's what we can do. Here's how we can make this look with very little money. We want more money to make more movies. But, we knew that film festivals, it was very, very rare that, they picked up comedies. So we said, we're gonna start putting some drama into this because everybody seems to favor drama. And also it's kind of soft. We don't have any stars. We need stars. So we need at least some money to afford some stars. We know we can't get Tom Cruise. You're not going to give us that kind of money, but some known commodities who are out there looking for work, sure, they'll come to Ottawa, very nice city, put in a couple of weeks, pick up a paycheck, and be in our movie.
Yeah.
And much of their credit, these guys said, okay, let's do it. And they gave us money, and we ended up making, I think, 4 more features, so 5 altogether. The first one being House of Luck.
Now talk about House of Luck.
I'm
Pat
not
Morita
really.
is in that one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, House of Luck. It's LUK. It's about
And it's
Oh,
streaming
right.
here.
I
I don't know.
did
Most
see
of
the
your movies
trailer
are
on that.
Yeah,
That's right. Sorry. Yes.
most
it
of your
looks
movies
great.
are streaming here.
They are, which is really cool. And they House of Luck plays all around the world. I had a neighbor who was a liaison between Canadian businessmen and Chinese businessmen, and he frequently took Canadian business people to China. And he said to me, Jesus, I go to Beijing, I go to my hotel, I turn on the TV set, the first friggin' thing I see is your face. The hell's my neighbor doing on television in Beijing? There I was with subtitles in this movie with Pat Morita, House of Luck. Kind of cool.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Very
and
cool.
you
Very cool.
had multiple jobs in the movie.
Yeah, yes, I did. Well, it was my first attempt at writing, drama, but I was still tethered to comedy where I felt more comfortable. And I thought, how can I do this? How can I reconcile these two forms? And I'd seen Woody Allen's Crimes and Misdemeanors, where he had a serious story and a funny story, and they were thematically linked. And then there was a bit of a crossover at the end, but really not much of one. And I went, oh, you know what? That will allow me to do both. I can do both. And hey, that's a good idea. So I wrote the story about all these different characters who hang out in this Chinese restaurant called the House of Luck. And the restaurant owner, who was kind of it's unspoken in the film, but he's kind of a god figure who's kind of guiding their lives and spiritually kind of directing their lives, pulling some strings without them kind of knowing it. A kind of a Buddha figure, if you will, as they learn major life lessons. Some of which were funny. That's where I came in, playing a failed car salesman based on the guy who would take his shirt off his back to sell to you. And then we had a couple of more serious storylines, including one that involved Michael Moriarty. But the guy who ran the Chinese restaurant was Pat Morita. So I wrote the script. Everybody liked the script. And then we had to find stars to be in this picture. I knew we weren't going to get big names. So I thought, okay, well, given what we have, who the heck, can we get? And I had always had Pat Morita in mind for the head of the restaurant because a friend of mine had worked with him on a kids show called The Adventures of Shelby Woo.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, and he said, yeah, I work with Pat, and he'd be, he's easy to work with. He's the guy. He works cheap. Checked all our boxes. So I was like, okay, great. So that was Pat. And Michael Moriarty was just coming off of Law and Order at that time.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
He'd won a bunch of Emmys. It was the biggest thing on television. And then he had a huge fight with the producers and he stormed off the set. And he quit the show overnight.
Oh.
Relocated here to Canada, way out east in Halifax. Just to tell, he told off the network. He told off the United States. He was like, screw this. He married a Canadian and he came to Canada. So I knew he was kind of in the hood, if you will. And I thought, gee, the guy's still hot. And no one in the States wants to touch him. I wonder if we can't get him. I wonder if we can't get him. So I call up his agent, find the name for his Canadian agent. And the guy acts like Mr. Big Shot. And he's like, you know how many calls a day I get for, Michael Moriarty? Excuse me, but you guys making a little independent feature in Ottawa of all places, and you think you're gonna please. I got a lot of that. So I said, well, can I send you the script anyway and show it to him? Well, you can try. So I sent him the script. I'm about to toot my own horn here. There was still answering machines in those days. About 2 days later, there's an answering machine message. It's the same guy. And he's like, hey, Dan, listen, Michael loves the script and he really wants to do this. And you know what? I really want to do this too. So give me a call.
Whole new guy.
Yeah. So anyway, so we got Michael Moriarty because he loved the writing, which is really kind of cool.
That's awesome.
And he shows up on the set, and the myth about celebrities is actually not a myth. It's quite true. Is that they're short people with big heads. Most of them are very short. They have very large heads. No one could really explain this. But anyway, Moriarty's a variation. He's a very, very tall guy with a very, very big head. It looks like something like in a parade, And he's got this big, gravelly kind of voice. And he shows up on the set and he says, Where's the writer of this thing? Where's the writer of this thing? Is that you? And he points to me and I'm like, yeah. Come here. And the guy's like 9 feet tall, And I walk up to him. I'm 5'10". And I say, yeah, lift that thing, would you? I'm wearing a baseball hat. I lift my baseball hat so he can stare me in the eyes. And he looks down at me and goes, you're the guy who wrote the script? I said, yeah. I'm thinking, he's going to say, this is crap. It needs work. Here's something I want to change, whatever. And it's the first time I'd ever written drama. And he said, I understand you write a lot of comedy. I said, yeah. Is your first time writing drama? And I'm like, yeah. And he said, let me tell you something, kid. You're a dramatist. And then he walked away. Yeah. Wow. And this is a guy I remembered reading in Tennessee Williams's autobiography, written in 1973. He said, I predict that the next greatest actor in America after Marlon Brando will be Michael Moriarty. And this guy just told me I was a good writer. Wow.
Whoa.
That blew me away. That blew me away.
Wow.
Now, Moriarty, I'm a bit of a tale out of school here. I'm not the only guy who's got stories about him, God knows. He had that hissy fit on the set of Law and Order. He's really two people. There's a very nice professional Michael Moriarty, and there's another guy who will really, really, really rake you through the coals and give you a hard time. And you never know which one you're going to get on any given day. And some days we got the nice guy, and some days we got the other guy. So it was a very, very bumpy ride. Last I heard, he's still in Canada. He's gone from east to west. He's in Vancouver, retired from acting, and he plays jazz piano in lounges.
Oh, that's his heart. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully that's bringing this guy, equilibrium and inner peace and all the things that you were kind of hoping he would find when we had
strong personality on that guy.
Moriarty was rather Morita. Sorry, Morita was a different story. Nice guy, funny guy, but a very, very, very bad alcohol. Very bad alcohol.
Oh, was he?
Oh yeah. And he came in and full of shtick. One of these guys was always on. It always like,
Oh.
And would make faces behind your back and would pinch people and would ad lib crazy gags and would mug, which was kind of fun. but it got worse. It got worse and worse and worse as he drank.
Mm.
And the
Oh.
shooting days would get really, really long. And oh my God. And it was, I think I talked about this in the Real Ottawa book. There was a rainy Sunday morning where we were shooting in this little Chinese restaurant because we all used real locations, no budget for studio or anything. And, they're setting up the shots and it's taking a long time. Sunday morning, everything's closed. I mean, no bars open Sunday morning on that strip. And there's a little pizza parlor with a little loading window open, and there's a kid there loading in cases of beer. And Morita walks out of his trailer through the rain and makes a beeline for this place. And I'm like, oh no. And he goes to the window and he says, hey, you kid. And the kid, just this 19-year-old kid who's unloading beer says, yeah, I got something for you. And he pulls out a $50 bill and he says, just give me one of those bottles. And meanwhile, this biblical rain is coming down. It's the saddest scene. Like here's Mr. Miyagi in the rain begging this kid with money for contraband beer on a Sunday morning. Like how low can you get? No further proof that alcoholism is a progressive disease than this.
Yeah.
And the kid's like, nope. Come on, kid. Don't you know who I am? Mr. Miyagi, the Karate Kid. Starts Karate Kid 2, Karate Kid 5. The kid's like, yeah, I know who you are. Keeps unloading the beer. Won't meet him in the eye. Okay, kid, hang on. We'll up the stakes. Hand in the pocket, $100. One bottle of beer for $100. And this is a US bill when the Canadian dollar is at like 65 cents. So it's worth like, a lot more than $100. And the kid's like, nope. And now Morita's almost crying. He's begging this kid for the beer. He's begging this kid for the bottle. And the kid finally, I give this kid a lot of credit. 19-year-old kid, service sector job. The kid says to him, you know that guy you trained in the Karate Kid? And Morita says, yeah. He said, well, I got a brother who owns this place that I work for. His name's Gino. Yeah. He could kick that kid's ass. So you're not getting the beer. And he slammed the door on him.
Great.
Oh my goodness. He just did him the hugest favor too.
So my job on the set when I wasn't acting was they said, Dan, go in Pat Morita's trailer and keep him off the sauce until his scenes come up. And I would go in his trailer and I'd say, so Karate Kid, tell me stories about, and then when you were on Happy Days, and because I had a depth of showbiz knowledge, I could go anywhere. So I was like, you made a brief sitcom nobody remembered. And when you did that bit on MASH, and he loved to tell stories, so we would go on, and it would keep him off the booze. And then it'd say, okay, Dan, tell him he's on, and then he'd go on the set. So that's how we got him sober and got through the film.
That's so awesome that you did that. Wow.
Oh. It was.
Well, you wanted your.
It was probably quite the trip. Jeez.
Yeah, it's a shame, it's a shame. But then we had great experiences with other people on other films. There's a film called Kiss of Death, another mob spoof, but a little more, less episodic, less kind of picayune, and or picaresque, I should say. And we had Ernest Borgnine on that one.
Oh, I love him.
And we were looking for stars again on the cheap because we didn't have a lot of dough. And I walked into a truck stop, and there were these videotapes for sale in a discount pile. And one of them was Ernest Borgnine crosses America in a Winnebago.
Wow.
Shot by his son. And I was like, I think this guy's available.
Oh, that is great. Oh,
so called up his agent and they said, yeah, man, that guy will be there in a heartbeat. And here was a guy who, won the best actor Oscar in like 1955. For Marty, and he showed up, nicest, sweetest guy you ever met in your life. Yeah. No trouble. Everybody loved them. He loved them. He did he would tour the city. This is independent filmmaking. So if guys were hauling lights, he'd get up and say, let me give you a hand. And he'd move the lights. At one point he's waiting on the set. We're shooting at a place on Somerset Street, downtown. And there's this little old lady, and she's looking around and she's confused. And he's about to do a take, and he says, "Hold it, fellas." And he gets up and he goes up to this little old lady. He says, "Ma'am, can I help you?" She doesn't recognize him. She says, "Well, I'm looking for so and so street, and I can't find." And he looks at me and he goes, "Where is that?" And I point to where it is, and he says, "Okay, walk with me." And he walks her 2 blocks to where she's going, to some bus stop, and then he comes back and he does the scene. Like, what a sweetheart.
Like one of the old movies he used to be in, in the 50s or 40s or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah. One day we were taking a
Oh.
break on the set, and a guy who ran a local video store came by, sadly passed on, a guy named Bill Kinsman. This is a great video store. And he was also a collector of Hollywood memorabilia that he would buy and he would put in his display window. So it would be like suit worn by James Cagney in The Public Enemy.
Oh.
And it would be like gun fired by, Harrison Ford in, Force 10 from Navarone. He'd actually buy these props in Hollywood and put them on display in his store. He had a huge collection. And we're taking a break on the set, and he shows up with 2 huge shopping bags. And he's got pictures, and he's got books, and he's got cowboy hats. I'm like, "Hey, Bill, what are you doing?" He said, I came to get Ernest Borgnine to sign some stuff. And I'm like, "Oh." And Borgnine, no gumption. He was like, "Great." And he sat down and he signed everything this guy had.
Whoa.
And the guy hands him a black and white 8x10 of the cast of The Wild Bunch, Sam Peckinpah's great movie. And Borgnine signs it. And there's a lovely moment where he stops and he looks at this photograph and he starts to cry. Now, not great big sobs, but you could see, that he's wet at the eyes. And he looks at it and he goes, "Wow, great guys. What a great, 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 great bunch of guys." And then he gives it back to my buddy. It was such a beautiful moment.
Oh man, that is touching.
Yeah, it really
That
was.
guy has probably seen so much.
Yeah, yeah,
The birth of Hollywood, really. I mean, when it got super big.
yeah,
about-
absolutely. Absolutely. He came out of the Navy, he was in the Navy in World War II, and came out of that. And he told us a story that his mom said to him, "Hey, why'd you think about being an actor?" And up to that point, it had never occurred to him in a million years. And he was like, "Really? I don't know. I'll try it." And he went to an audition, and a great old veteran director, a guy named Robert Siodmak, saw his face and said, you come back tomorrow. I want to see you." And Borgnine said, "Great." And he thought, "Man, this is easy." And he shows up the next day and he opens the door, and the room is filled with about 100 guys who all look like him.
Oh, that's
And he's like,
hilarious.
I've been had. This is tougher than I thought. I'm leaving." And he's just about to go when the director guy comes out again and says, "There you are. Follow me." And he walks past all of these guys and right into his very first movie. And by the time we had him so many years later, he'd done over 100 and he was still making.
Seriously.
And the guy worked until he died. He was 95 when he died. I think we had him when he was like 85 or so. And
Goodness.
still sharp as a tack, still had it, still in demand.
I
What about-
remember the Poseidon Adventure.
What
Oh,
about
sorry,
Graham
Mark.
Green? You worked
Oh,
with
Graham
Graham
Greene.
Green.
That was another movie we
explain to the
did.
listeners where they would remember Graham Green from, because he's been in everything.
Yeah, he was. Well, we talked about Native First Nations culture. He's a First Nations from somewhere here in Canada. Popular actor, I think, first here on Canadian television, and then ended up in Dances with Wolves, and was nominated for a Best Supporting Actor Oscar. And his career really took off after that. He was in Thunderheart and a whole bunch of other great films. But everybody knew that he still loved coming back to Canada, and he still loved working in Canada, and he was a fairly hot commodity. And I was like, well, it's like the Moriarty thing. Let's just try. The only thing that can happen is somebody says no. And he said, "Sure, I'd love to do it." And we had him show up. And he was we're shooting a scene in a public park. That was his first scene. And he had a very bad flu that day at a temperature of 108. And he shows up anyway. And he's in costume and he's got the chills and he's shivering. And you can see that he's looking around for a place to throw up.
Oh,
And we're all like, okay, let's see if we can get through these scenes while keeping a comfortable distance from this guy.
oh boy.
But you know what's true of any performer, the second someone yells action, all that's gone, and they act as if nothing happens. No chills, no nausea. They say the lines perfectly, and then you yell cut, and they go, "Bleh!" And then you say action, and they're right back to looking ship shape. He was a total pro.
Yeah,
I
you
loved
can
everything
tell.
he's ever done. He's great.
Yeah, good
Dances
guy.
with
Nice.
Wolves, great.
Yeah, nice guy too. Low key, no problems. And the real problem in that movie was me.
Yeah.
The hook of the movie was a nice little hook, I thought. The idea was Joe Pesci meets Annie Hall.
Mm.
So the premise is you had this, you know, sweet-natured kind of, you know, ditz who was not the best judge of character. And you had a guy who was a bar bouncer, very tough bar bouncer, based on a real character here in town, died many years ago, a legend here in the city, named Jerry Barber. And Jerry Barber looked like your grandfather or your old French Canadian uncle, but he was the meanest, toughest SOB that ever walked the earth. I mean, he could not only kick the Karate Kid's ass, he could kick everybody's ass. And there were legendary stories of guys, you know, bikers having their heads put through walls by this guy, ending up in traction because of this. You did not mess with this guy. And people tried to kill him repeatedly over a 20-year period. They bombed his house, they bombed his car, and he escaped all of it unscathed and finally died peacefully at home of a heart attack
Wow.
at a ripe old age. But he was small. That was the ironic thing. He was a small old guy, but you did not mess with him. So I had an idea where I had this small person played by an actor here who's fairly small, a guy named Pierre Bro, talented guy, but on the short side. And he was kind of my Joe Pesci. So guys would say, "You're going to bounce me? Nice try." And he would. And then one day he goes to a bank machine and he helps this woman he bumps into, this Annie Hall style character. And he says, "Wait a minute, you gave me this big deposit to put in this bank machine for you. How do you know that I wasn't a dangerous character and I wasn't going to run away with your money?" And she said, "Are you kidding me?"
Oh, that's funny.
And she mistakes him for this other guy, and they have this romance. And he starts to think, because of her influence and the way she sees him, gee, maybe there is another side of me. Maybe I'm not just this big gruff guy. And thematically, the movie is about male identity. That, you know, we're guys, you know, but at the same time, you know, we can be soft and sympathetic and nice, and so we're kind of this two-headed animal. And for some of us, that's confusing. You'd go, well, what am I supposed to be in any given situation? How do these two pieces of the identity puzzle go together? That's what the film's supposed to be about. Those are the questions the bouncer's asking himself. So there's a big climactic moment set at a travel agency where the woman works, where she finally confronts this guy when he reveals his true identity, that A, he's a bouncer, and, you know, by the way, he unwittingly just bounced her ex-boyfriend and put him in traction, with whom she still, you know, was friends. So she confronts him, and then he gives her a big speech where we get to see that he's actually taken these two identities and put them together finally. So it's a big, big scene. I'm on the set because they're worried about, you know, the lines. What if the actors can't make it fly? It needs a rewrite. It's a big scene. It's important. We need the writer there. Dan, the security blanket, can you be there? Fine. So they're just about to shoot this big, big, big climactic scene. We've only got this place for one night, this travel agency. The regular staff's coming into work, you know, in a few hours in the morning. And suddenly I have a kidney stone attack. And I hit the floor and I'm writhing in pain. And I'm like, "Oh, guys, oh my God, I gotta call me an ambulance, please. God, I don't know it's a kidney stone attack. I just know something really bad is going on. It feels like death." And they say to me, "You know, Dan, we can't do that. We really need you here for the scene." "Yeah, you don't understand. I mean,
my goodness.
And they're like, "Look, just do us a favor. Just don't talk during the takes. And when we get one we finally like, we'll call you an ambulance. Can you do that?" I don't know. So I do my best to shut up.
Oh my goodness.
They do the scene, and then the actors turn to me and say, "What do you think?" And from my writhing position on the floor, "Well, you know, if you put a little more emphasis on the second word, I think it might be more effective."
You're still working. Oh yeah.
And they're like, yeah, that's good. Okay, shut up. and they do another. And after like take number 5 or 6, I realized, wait a minute, I'm perpetuating my own misery here. I'm giving them advice, thereby keeping myself on this floor in pain instead of getting the guys to call an ambulance.
Well,
So
after
finally, when
so
they
many
have a
takes, you
take
should be
that's
able to
not too
find a good
bad.
one.
Yeah, a take that's not too bad, an ambulance comes and off I go. The other weird thing that happened on that film, this is very weird, is, Ottawa doesn't have a lot of film infrastructure, filmmaking infrastructure. So, for example, if you shoot on film, there's no lab to get your rushes done. So, usually the stuff would go to a lab, it gets developed, you can watch the rushes and say, oh, we got to go back and reshoot this, that, and the other thing. It's too dark, it's too whatever. What happens is you shoot, the stuff goes on a bus to Montreal where there's infrastructure. Somebody there develops your film, and then the rushes come back to so many days later. What's tricky about that is by the time you get to see your rushes, your location is gone, maybe your actors are gone, and you can't reshoot. What you see is what you get. It's not like Hollywood where they reshoot things all the time if something doesn't work. Here, it's high wire. There's no contingency. So it's tricky.
How long did that take to get back to you?
Yeah, it's tricky business.
How long did it take?
To back and forth about 2 or 3 days.
Oh, okay.
So we send our stuff off to Montreal to get developed. And we got a phone call from some mysterious sounding guy. And he says, yeah, I just want you guys to know that I got some film cans here. And it looks like it's pretty important stuff. And we're like, yeah, it is important stuff. It's rushes that we need this footage to complete a movie that we're being paid to make. Well, if you want it, it's going to cost you.
Oh.
So some guy got a hold of these film cans and was holding us for ransom. So we called the cops, and the cops said, yeah, we know what this is. There's a ring operating outside of the local bus station, and we've never been able to nail these guys.
What?
So call these guys back. Yeah, we had some way of contacting them. I forget what it is. So get back in contact with these guys, and we will set up a sting in your offices. We'll show up pretending we're doing business or office workers with you guys. Arrange for them to show up at your office, and we'll nab these guys.
Oh, this is out of control.
I know. So we were like,
insane.
This is better than the movie. I wish I did this.
It really is.
Only nobody would believe it. It's stupid. Anyway, so that's what we did, and these guys, arranged that they would show up at our offices. Cops showed up dressed kind of like us, and they all sat around pretending they were typing scripts as we waited and waited and waited for these guys to show up, and they never did. Mm-hmm. And it's because these cops, in their infinite wisdom, showed up in unmarked white police cars that they parked very prominently in front of our offices. So obviously these guys with the film can said, oh, look, the cops are here. We're not going there. Goodbye. And we had to go to our investors and beg for money to reshoot those scenes, because there were scenes that involved Graham Greene and some of the stars all over again.
Oh my goodness, that's a great story.
Yeah.
Independent filmmaking, man, anything can happen.
Wow, which is more expensive, the ransom or the reshoot?
Yeah.
Do you see yourself making any films in the future or no?
Well, I welcome the opportunity. I haven't written a screenplay in I don't know how many years it's been now, maybe 7. You have to appreciate that that was a time when that was a cool, sexy thing everybody wanted to invest in. Today, if you go to someone and say, I want money for an independent film, they'd say, nah, that time's kind of passed. The sexy thing now is an app. You got an idea for an app? Oh yeah, I'll give you money for that.
Sure.
Things change, things evolve. Yeah. So, I was a product of my time in that respect. But if the opportunity ever presented itself again, and I thought it was a good one, sure. What's tough about being a screenwriter on this side of the Canada-US border is that America is always coming to Canada to shoot stuff. And it creates jobs for camera people. It creates jobs for grips, gaffers, lighting people, art directors,
writers,
production. Well, it's exactly right. But the writing still comes out of either New York or Hollywood.
Oh, that's right. He's
So
got
it's
it.
the one thing that doesn't come here. It's the
No.
one thing
Oh.
that doesn't come here. TV sometimes will come here, but film-wise, screenwriting never comes here.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, we really enjoyed, talking to you about your journey in life. This is so inspiring to Brian and I and all the listeners out there. And we encourage you to check out Dan's work. We'll post IMDb, we'll post your website. This was great. As always, Brian, Mark 2.0. Thank you so much, Dan. Make
Thank you,
sure to
Dan.
subscribe on YouTube and look for more great podcasts and follow us on social media. We really appreciate you, Dan.
Yeah, Dan, I'm really impressed with all the things you've done. I think the future is going to be bright for you. You've had so many
Sure.
connections, so many people. You've got a lot of good credits, a lot of good little notches in your hat or whatever, feathers in your cap or whatever. And I'm glad you were on because I have a feeling that something big is going to happen to you one
Yeah.
day. And we're going to have
Well,
you
I
back on. I
appreciate
hope
that,
you come
guys.
back on.
Yeah, we're
I
looking forward to
appreciate
having you
that,
back.
guys. I tell you,
Yeah.
one of the joys of getting older, and everybody says there aren't many, but if you've done so many products, you got a catalog that's kind of still out there. You get opportunities like this. You guys
Yeah.
found me out of nowhere, and you have me on your podcast, and maybe I get discovered by I'm sure I will be by a new audience thanks to you guys.
Sure.
And
That's
it's
why
great.
that's why we do this. So
Well,
And
kudos
once
to you guys,
again, what
man.
are those wonderful books titled exactly? I'm sorry.
First one is called REEL, Real Ottawa, with the movie theaters we love.
I'm checking that out for
local
sure.
theaters. And the other one that's coming out, probably more available to you guys because it's published by a U.S. publisher, a company called McFarland. And it's a book called Drop Dead Funny, American Film Comedies of the 1970s. And that'll be out in spring or summer of 2023.
That's awesome. My dad had all those books that just had information on every movie and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to both of those books. It's really great having you tonight.
thanks
Well,
so
thanks,
much.
guys.
As always, we are Mark 2.0.
And I'm Brian.
I'm
Thanks,
Mark.
guys.